What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the New York Giants are in the red right now in their salary cap space, $150,000 over the salary cap, but there's still plenty of time for them to make the necessary moves to sign their draft class and get ready for the upcoming 2023 season. Right now, yes, they're in the red, but long-term, the Giants are in a pretty damn good spot with their salary cap health. And so if you take a look at it, some of the players that have extensions coming up and a bunch of these contracts that Joe Schoen handed out this offseason, the Giants are healthy right now. They're looking good. And it's definitely an exciting time following a very successful 2023 NFL draft. It's an exciting time to be a Giants fan, knowing that the future is just as strong as the present, which is something that we haven't been able to say for a very, very long time. But we're going to go ahead and dive into the salary cap health today in this episode. But before we do, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on the Giants salary cap health?
I'm doing great, man. And after watching kind of what Joe Schoen did in the draft class, and interestingly, the draft class this year is only going to cost us about $2.5 million, whereas last year we had 2 first-round picks at the top of the first round, which cost us around $10 million. So you're seeing that the Giants don't have a lot of money invested because of our late-round first-round pick this year, and the fact that we got 3 starting-level players in rounds 1, 2, and 3. It keeps the costs down, and that just kind of makes what this draft class is so much more valuable. The fact that not only are they all considered starters immediately, but they're also extremely affordable and cheap. So exciting to say nonetheless, but the future is bright for the Giants. Last year, of course, the Giants had to kind of hit the reset button with their salary space. I did a deep dive this morning into kind of what's going on in the cap situation. They're still paying Kenny Golladay $14.7 million in dead money this year. They're paying Shepard $4.24 million. He had a void year built into his deal. They just signed him to a whole different contract. And then $3.6 million of guaranteed money to Kadarius Toney, who's now with the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's $22.7 million in dead money remaining from the contracts and, traded players that Dave Gettleman left behind or things that Joe Schoen may have done. So that's a lot less than what we had last year, which is, we're still paying Golden Tate money last season. So it's kind of incredible to see how the Giants have managed to offload a lot of those bad contracts and which kind of steers in the direction of a more positive future. But, this episode is going to be really, built upon breaking down what the future holds. The big contracts upcoming for guys like Dexter Lawrence. And, Joe Schoen did say that they're having really good conversations with his agents and representatives. Andrew Thomas, one of the best left tackles in football. They picked up his 5th-year option yesterday. So good thing for Andrew. He'll be with us for 2 more years guaranteed. And then you extend guys like that. When you have one of the best tackles in football, especially left tackles, you don't let those type of players go. You ink them to long-term deals. He's only 24 years old, I believe, which makes him even more valuable. So I'm pretty ecstatic about what the Giants have done. I want to take a look at some of the upcoming contracts, how much money they have in the future, why a lot of the contracts they've signed this offseason already, the incentivized 1-year deals, are such good kind of situations for Big Blue because it doesn't lock you into big money. And a lot of the contracts they did sign, for example, the Daniel Jones one was front loaded with a lot of the dead money. So in the past, Dave Gettleman may have, backloaded a lot of those contracts. It's all about guaranteed money, right? Because if you have guaranteed money backloaded, that money doesn't hit until later on. And then you're strapped 2-3 years down the line, which is what he did with a lot of those contracts, guys like James Bradbury, Adoree Jackson. So really unfortunate. This management style and strategy for the cap manipulation is a little bit different. Joe Schoen and co are front loading a lot of that money, the dead money for that matter. Daniel Jones has $82 million in dead money that will be kind of hitting this year, this upcoming season. So it really allows you to move on earlier than later. Of course, you hope to God you don't have to move on and then these players pan out. But if you do, it gives you a really nice insurance policy. So like when you're seeing the difference in strategy here for the Giants and what Joe Schoen is doing, you're seeing that he's, front loading all these contracts. So that way you're not hurt a couple years down the line, and it gives you a lot more fluidity and a lot more flexibility to go out and sign other free agents. How different do you think the strategy is now, the incentivized contracts, everything that they're doing to kind of put us in a healthy cap situation so that we can go out and sign those last pieces. We can consume big contracts if the Giants do want to trade for a star receiver or whatever it might be. We have that type of ability, which ultimately is the last piece of the puzzle sometimes to winning championships. You see that one difference maker, whether it's like a Von Miller for Los Angeles, or a big receiver like a Stephon Diggs, or whatever it might be. those guys come in and make a significant impact, but you can't do that unless you have the available funds. And the Giants have put themselves in a spot where they do. And the future looks really bright based on how much salary space they do have.
Yeah, the future looks really bright based on the salary cap space. And if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago, we were talking about some of these contracts. And I said my one word to really sum up the New York Giants offseason this year is flexibility. I think that the Giants have been extremely flexible. Joe Schoen has been super flexible, not only changing his philosophy at times, being flexible in trading up, trading down, all that kind of stuff in the draft. But of course, with these contracts, they've all been extremely flexible. You're looking at the Darius Slayton deal, which is incentive laden 2-year deal, very easy to move on from. You're looking at, of course, the Paris Campbell deal, 1-year deal, incentive laden. He has to have a career year in order for it to be the maximum salary cap hit. And of course, the Daniel Jones contract, how flexible that thing is. They can kick the can down the road if they want to. They can restructure that contract, move it down the road, move the guaranteed money into the back if they need to. But right now, having it all front loaded gives them the flexibility to where, let's say in 2 years, if Daniel Jones isn't panning out, they can very easily move on from him without taking any type of significant financial penalty. And I think the other big one to mention is Darren Waller, flexibility in that contract. They instantly restructured that contract, but even still looking at it, there's no big cap hits in there. They can move on from him at any point during this contract. And I know Darren Waller, very exciting piece of the new offense. I'm super excited to see him on the field, but he has had a lot of injury history in the past. You don't want to acquire a guy with a lot of injury history on a very loaded contract that you can't get out of. The Giants have every single opportunity to get out of that contract if need be. And again, you just said it. You hope that you don't have to move on from any of these guys prematurely. You hope that they play out all their contracts, but it's very nice to have the flexibility to get out of the contracts if you need it. And I think, when you're asking me the difference in philosophy here, that's really the main difference, is that the Giants don't want to be too loyal to any one player. And I think that might have been part of the problem for Dave Gettleman. He wanted to instill confidence in a bunch of these guys, say, we are confident in you, we trust you, so let's give you all of the money in the world and watch you play out this contract. And then backloading it was also a big mistake for the Giants, because it really just forced them to have no future with this team. That's why we kept going through these cycles of bad years and bad years and bad years, because the next contract that was backloaded, well, there's your ginormous cap hit for this year, for next year. It just kept happening over and over again for the New York Giants. But now Joe Schoen is making sure that no surprises occur over the next few years, having all of that guaranteed money early on and then not backloading them, front loading them rather. It's been a really, really interesting change of pace here for the New York Giants. And I actually do appreciate this new strategy from Joe Schoen. And I think that it really does offer the Giants a lot more room to improve down the line and a lot more of an ability to be a winning football team for a prolonged period of time. And I think that's obviously what the Giants have been missing for quite a while, being a good football team for a prolonged period of time. We've been a bad football team for a prolonged period of time. But as you mentioned, the Giants are now in a position to where, let's say next off season, there's a player on the trade market and they want to go out there and make that run. They're going to have the cap flexibility to do so, just because of the way that they've structured all of these contracts. And a lot of the deals that they handed out this offseason were 1-year deals, short-term contracts. A'Shawn Robinson, 1-year deal. Paris Campbell, 1-year deal. Darius Slayton, yes, a 2-year deal, but essentially a 1-year deal. It's very easy to move on from after 1 year. So looking at all of these contracts, Alex, the New York Giants can really play with their money next offseason, barring any big contract extensions. But we do know that they have some big ones on the way. How do you think that those big extensions that are coming up are going to affect the Giants, not only in the short term, but in the long term? And of course, I'm referring to maybe Xavier McKinney coming up, but probably more pressing of a matter, Dexter Lawrence. His deal is probably coming very soon. Saquon Barkley still potentially could get a deal this offseason. And of course, we know that Andrew Thomas is on track to be probably the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. So how do you think that those deals are going to affect the Giants, not only in the short term, but also in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, look, the short term is interesting, right? Because you also have to consider Leonard Williams and Adoree Jackson. So, I'll read you exactly what I wrote this morning, which kind of breaks it down, number by number, and essentially gives you an idea of like what the Giants have to do right now, what they can do to open up some salary space in the immediate future, but also help themselves down the road. So essentially at the present, Big Blue has a negative 100K salary space, which you referenced earlier in the episode. This figure is expected to increase after they restructure Leonard Williams' contract, right? Williams is slated to count $32.26 million against the cap this year, but he did reference the fact that he would be open to a pay cut, and Joe Schoen was like, we're going to hold you to that. So we don't know if he's actually going to do it, but a restructure or a pay cut are basically guaranteed unless the Giants outright cut him, which they would save about $12 million by doing so. But again, you're losing one of the pillars on our defensive line, which can't afford to be done. So restructure or a pay cut are definitely in the near future. Maybe they even extend him and push some of that money into the future. But I think more so they would prefer to go in the route of a pay cut or a restructure. So I think that's probably what's coming up in the near future. As I referenced earlier, $2.5 million to sign the rookie class. Right now they're negative. So they need to restructure Leonard Williams, whatever it might be, to clear up enough salary space to sign the rookies, which obviously will be done. Now, when it comes to Adoree Jackson, 27 years old, is in the prime of his career. He's set to count $19 million against the salary cap this upcoming season. They would only save 6.6 by releasing him, which is not going to happen because, we don't have any other corners unless you're willing to make Deonte Banks your CB1 immediately, which is very unlikely. So I would actually go as far as to say I would prefer the Giants extend Adoree Jackson now, give some cap relief this season, front load a lot of that guaranteed money in 2024 and then have that Adoree Jackson and Deonte Banks combination locked down for the foreseeable future. They're both very good man coverage corners that can fit a multitude of different schemes. Adoree Jackson proved to be a pretty solid tackler last year, and the only reason he got injured was because the Giants made one of the dumbest decisions in the history of this freaking team and used their CB1 as a punt returner. Again, still baffles me to this day they actually came to that conclusion. But what are your thoughts about Adoree Jackson? I know you wrote about him this morning as well. Do you think that it would be smart for the Giants to extend him now, kind of clear up a little bit of salary space, but also lock down a really nice tandem of corners for the next couple of years, especially because he's only 27 years old, he'll be 28 years old this upcoming season, but he's in the middle of his prime. And I think that it would be fine to keep him around because at some point, the Giants are going to have to sign a cornerback and they know what they're getting in Jackson. And he's relatively healthy when they're not doing dumb stuff like using him as a punt returner.
Yeah, I kind of am a little bit torn on the Adoree Jackson situation. I think I'll disagree with you there that he's relatively healthy because throughout the entirety of his career, Adoree Jackson has really struggled to stay healthy. Even going back to his days with the Tennessee Titans, his first season, yes, he played all 16 games. Second season, played all 16 games. But his third year, he only played in 11. His fourth year, he only played in 3 total games, missed the majority of that season with an injury. And then over the course of the last 2 seasons with the Giants, he has missed time in each of those seasons, played in 13 games in 21 and only 10 games in 22. Again, terrible decision by Brian Daboll to put him on the punt return unit. I think that was a really, really bad idea, and that did ultimately injure him and knock him out for those 7 games in the regular season. But injuries just seem to follow this guy throughout the entirety of his career. And now entering this next season, his 7th season in the NFL, he'll be 28 years old during this season. He is getting up there in age, and I actually think that the New York Giants, looking at it from that flexibility standpoint, they probably shouldn't lock themselves into this deal because I think that they have the ability to move into next offseason without moving this contract around. I don't think they need to restructure it. I actually think that keeping in mind how many players are on the Giants roster right now, way more than the 53 that they're going to have at the start of the regular season. Naturally, they're going to trim the fat of this roster. We have players on this roster like Darnay Holmes. I believe releasing him frees you $2.5 million in salary cap space, right? So if he doesn't have a good summer, he's gone at the end of training camp. And that $2.5 million, that signs your entire rookie draft class. So the New York Giants are fine. They actually don't need to panic, don't need to restructure or extend anybody if they don't need to. And Adoree Jackson, while I do want to see him around long term, I'm starting to kind of understand the logic behind not signing him to an extension right now. And I think that when you look at it, giving him this next year to play out this contract and prove himself, it actually helps the Giants because right now, if they were to pay him, they might be overpaying him based on how he performs this upcoming season. Let's say that they extend him, they give him, over $10 million per season, but then this year he only plays in 5 games. Well, then you're locked into him for another 2 years or so, and you don't know whether or not he's going to be healthy for those seasons. Maybe the Giants just go back into the 2024 draft and draft another first-round cornerback, and then you have a real legion of boom over in the secondary with Deonte Banks and whoever they draft. That's just another alternative solution there. So Adoree Jackson, as much as I like him, as much as he did prove his worth to this team in the postseason, you look at that Week 16 matchup with the Vikings, Justin Jefferson, 133 yards, a touchdown. He absolutely torched the Giants secondary. They had nobody who could guard him. Then you go over to the wild card round. Adoree Jackson shuts him down, holds him to under 50 yards and 0 touchdowns. He showed how valuable of a player he is to this team just in those 2 games alone. He wasn't in one of those games, the one that he was in, lockdown. So that's the true value of Adoree Jackson. He is necessary to the success of this team, but will he continue to be necessary? That remains to be seen. It's about whether or not he stays healthy, and it's about the development of Deonte Banks opposite of him. So Adoree Jackson, as he gets up there in age, I assume that the price will continue to go down, but we'll see how he plays this upcoming season before the Giants go ahead and try to extend him. I think that I know that that's the route they're trying to take. They want to let him play it out, and I actually do think that I agree with it. The Giants are in too healthy of a cap situation to sacrifice their future just to ensure that Adoree Jackson is on the roster next season, in my opinion. And there's another player who also has a very bloated cap hit for this upcoming season. We've been talking for a long time about potentially restructuring this contract, extending him, getting this cap hit down. It's Leonard Williams. His cap hit this year is $32 million. And I've actually changed my mind on that one as well. I don't think they need to extend him. I think that the Giants are completely fine and they can keep that $32 million cap hit. I think they're making a bold choice. It's one that not a lot of people have thought of, but I think that the Giants are making the right decision by letting him play out this final year of his deal so that they owe him zero money the upcoming seasons. I think one of the main missions for Joe Schoen has been to get rid of all dead cap for the Giants. I mean, listen, Dave Gettleman would just stack dead cap. He did not care if it was $70 million worth of dead cap on your salary cap. He did not care at all. He was fine with that. Joe Schoen is not fine with that. He's not even close to okay with that. He does not want to have any dead cap allocated towards Leonard Williams if Leonard Williams isn't going to be here long term. So I actually think that Joe Schoen's making a bold decision to let Leonard Williams play out the final year of his deal if he decides to do that. And that gives them zero obligation to pay him a dime or have any penalties on their salary cap space in the upcoming years for Leonard Williams. And I think that might be the best route to take considering the status of the Giants defensive line. I mean, you still got Dexter Lawrence there. They just drafted a young kid in the 6th round, Jordan Riley. I mean, listen, Leonard Williams, as much as I like him, as much as I want him to be around long term, he did just start to get injured this past year. He's been healthy throughout his entire career, but 30 years old, finally starting to get hampered with injuries. Maybe he's taken a step back. Maybe it's not a player that we want to extend. And I do think that Joe Schoen is probably looking at it as, let's see how he plays this year before we jump into anything and make any early commitments to extending him. So the Giants are going to have a really bloated cap space this upcoming season. But if you're looking at all those big cap hits, it's in the final year of the deal. Why extend and push that money down to the next season? Just get it off the books after the 2023 season, go into 2024 with a boatload of cap space, reevaluate those players with those big cap hits, and renegotiate next offseason if need be. But again, maybe Williams and Jackson aren't good this year. You just walk away, no financial penalty. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on that? Potentially just letting these guys play out these contracts, Leonard Williams in particular. I mean, his salary cap hit is ginormous, but if you don't touch it at all, you end up saving a lot of money in the long run if you could fit everybody under the salary cap space. So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I'm fine letting Leonard Williams' contract play out. And I think that you have a point with Adoree Jackson in the sense that maybe you look to extend him if you are going to at the deadline next year. Like, and maybe you're like, okay, we're doing well. He's performing really well. We can't afford to lose him. And here's the thing. Like, you could go out and draft another cornerback in the first round, assuming that there is one. Like, you have to assume like there's a guy we really like there, and there's someone that really fits our scheme, and that really, and not that the scheme relevance is altogether like the most important thing in the world, but I do think there has to be like a certain grade that you're like, okay, like this is someone we're willing to take right now. You're betting a lot on Deonte Banks panning out, which we all are very optimistic he will, but of course we haven't seen him play it down in the NFL yet, so it's just optimism at this point in time. I like having veteran presences in the secondary. Like, I like having a guy that's established. I like having a guy that you can count on against top receivers in the league. Adoree Jackson is one of those few guys. You pay guys like that. And look, he's played 26 games in his last 2 years. That's a pretty solid amount. Cornerback, he's a smaller guy, so I'm not surprised he got hurt. The only reason he got injured last year was because of the punt situation, which I think he stays healthy for the majority of the year if he doesn't get hurt in that situation there. So personally, I kind of feel as though if he is playing well and you're like, we can't afford to lose this player, and him and Deonte Banks could be a really, really great combo for a long time. Think of it this way. Deonte Banks is the 24th overall pick. He's not making that much money, right? If you were to sign 2 premium cornerbacks, you're paying like $40 million in total, maybe a little bit less. You have Banks and Adoree Jackson. You can afford to pay 1 star corner when your other guy is on a rookie deal that also has a 5th-year option. So I feel as though paying at the cornerback spot a premium position is not a bad thing. A lot of those younger cornerbacks do not pan out. So, we still have to make sure Banks is one of those guys that does pan out. And the free agency class next year is thin. You have like an aging veteran in Stephon Gilmore. You have Kendall Fuller. Jeff Okudo just got traded to Atlanta. He's not very good. Chidobe Awuzie, Emmanuel Mosley. Like it's nothing to be excited about, something to write home about. So, Trayvon Diggs, if you want to go down that route, I'm sure they're going to extend him. So, the Giants you can't look at next year's free agency class and say, you know what, there's a lot of options here that we can pick up that are going to make our team a lot better. Adoree Jackson probably would be the best option on the free agent market. So you have to make the decision. Are you going to extend the guy that's in his prime, or are you going to let him walk and take your shot in the draft or a different player on a cheaper contract? It's certainly something to keep in mind, which is why I'm floating the concept of extending him. But right now, the Giants in 2024 have $99 million in available salary space. Assuming Dexter Lawrence gets paid $23 million per season, something around that range. He's on the books for about 12.4 this upcoming season. So, negate 13 million from that 99, you're at around $86 million to spend. Adoree Jackson, of course, you have to find another CB, and then your roster is depleted because there's a lot of 1-year deals and a lot of rookies that are expiring contracts and whatnot. The Giants are still trying to build the foundation of this team through the draft, which is ultimately what good teams do. You go out and you build good teams through the draft. Also, Saquon Barkley, what's happening there? Is he going to sign the franchise tag? Are they going to find a common ground and extend him on a long-term deal? Personally, it doesn't seem like it's trending in that direction. Would I love Saquon to stay on a fair contract? Absolutely, I would. But I don't think Joe Shane's keen on spending big at the running back position. A big reason, they went out and drafted Eric Gray at the back end of the 2023 draft. And then you find a guy in Gray who is a 3-down compatible back who could end up developing into a starter. The Giants aren't looking for this massive playmaker, like just ridiculous threat at running back. They're looking for a guy that can pick up first downs. And then they're using that speed on the outside and in the slot with guys like Paris Campbell and Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton and Darren Waller to be your big playmakers, to be that guy. The Giants are trending in the direction of being a pass-happy offense. That's what all the best offenses do in football right now. You look at the Chiefs, you look at the Bills, you look at some of the best offenses. They are pass-happy. The running backs are a luxury, and we know this, but Saquon is much more than a running back. He's also a leader. He's a captain. We can do a lot of the receiving game. So it's tough to stand. You stand on the fence and you kind of look at both sides of it and say, yes, I get why they let him go, but I also get why they would resign him. It's tough to kind of justify either side. But at the end of the day, the Giants are investing a lot in the receiver core. They don't have that WR1, but they have a lot of WR2 talent, and Darren Waller's basically a wide receiver 1 when he's healthy. So you look at that, trying to supplement things on a much cheaper contract with Darren Waller's pay. But he also has a couple, I think 2 years left on his deal. So you have a pretty good amount of time with Darren Waller before he ends up a free agent. And, right now I kind of feel good about where the Giants are. So like after Dexter Lawrence's extension, you're looking at $86 million in salary space, and the fact that they just picked up Andrew Thomas's contract or his 5th-year option, that money's accounted for. So they have about 45 rostered players, which means they need to fill another 37 roster spots to get to 53, or 38 roster spots to get to 53, which a lot of them get filled through the draft, undrafted free agents, 1-year guys like Paris Campbell's of the world, Deshaun Robinson's of the world, a lot of those kind of players. But, when you're looking at what the Giants are doing through the draft and a lot of these 1-year contracts with a lot of upside incentivized contracts, how are you feeling about the depth of this team right now? Like, are they doing a good job building out the depth? Are they doing a good job building out the weaker spots? Because in my opinion, it's head and shoulders better than what it was. We are doing a really good job building out the run stopping unit. Of course, you got more linebacker support, though. Okereke, you have Nunez Roche, you have Ashawn Robinson. We could use a couple more pass rushers personally. I feel like we may be a little bit weak in that regard, but something to keep an eye on there. Of course, behind Azeez Ojulari, like who do we really have? So, definitely something that I would keep an eye on moving forward. I think you still have like Ellerson Smith guys that like may end up being dropped at some point. There's probably going to be some good, decent pickup options on the waiver wire after camp and during preseason. So, what are your thoughts on the depth of this roster? I think they've done a really good job supplementing a lot of the weaknesses with really nice contracts and draft selections.
Yeah, listen, I think that the depth, like you said, is head and shoulders better than what we had last year, even the year before that. The Giants really haven't had depth like they have right now in a very long time. I think that Joe Shane's done a really solid job finding veteran players, especially at the wide receiver position. The Giants really learned a tough lesson last year. They had a lot of players on that roster get injured, and they had a severe lack of depth. This offseason, though, I mean, you've got guys that we haven't even discussed in a while, like Colin Johnson. I mean, Jamison Crowder's on the team. You've got that guy Jeff Smith that they signed. There's a lot of veteran wide receivers backing up our starters. I mean, our starters right now looking like Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins. Of course, you've got Hyatt now, who's going to be one of your starters, and Wan'Dale Robinson when he's healthy. Those are your 4 locked-in players, but you're only going to keep maybe 3 or 4 more of those guys. You're not going into the regular season with 9 wide receivers on your roster. So a couple of those guys are going to get cut. Sterling Shepard could be one of those players that doesn't make the final roster. But that's a good thing, is that we're talking about some of these players that in the past were absolute locks to make the roster. Now we have so much depth there that nobody's a real lock except for maybe those 4 guys that I just mentioned. And then, of course, you look into the secondary. There's a lot of names right there. The Giants just added a couple more players into the secondary through the draft. Javarius Owens, safety out of Houston. We just discussed him yesterday. Go check it out if you haven't seen that episode yet. And then, of course, we also got Trey Hawkins, Old Dominion cornerback. He's going to compete somewhere on this roster as well. And you're throwing him into the mix with Darnay Holmes, Cordell Flatt, Aaron Robinson, Amani Oruwariye. There's a lot of players at that cornerback spot and the safety spot too. Bobby McCain. That's a lot of depth. That's a lot more depth than what we had in the past. I mean, Amani Oruwariye, if the Giants didn't draft Deonte Banks in the first round, he might have had a chance at stealing that outside cornerback spot opposite of Adoree Jackson. So now he's just really solid depth. He's been a 3-year starter for the Detroit Lions over the past few seasons. He's been pretty good. He had a really bad 2022 season, but 2021, he was establishing himself as one of the best young defensive backs in the NFL. So that's great depth for the New York Giants at the cornerback spot, just having Amani Oruwariye on the roster. Linebacker, you could probably add some more depth there. Offensive line could do some more depth. But again, as you just mentioned, Alex, we've still got waiver wire pickups that are going to happen at the end of preseason. There's always those 53-man roster cuts. Some players are going to trickle down into the Giants' laps, and then we'll see if they make some additions to the offensive line, the defensive line, the linebacker core. But right now, I do feel a lot more confident about the depth that the New York Giants have in 2 positions in particular, in the defensive backfield and in the wide receiver core. I think that they just did an excellent job adding depth there. And as you mentioned, running back Eric Gray, he's your RB2. He's going to see playing time. He is a good player. He has starting qualities in the NFL. So I just think overall, the skill positions have so much more depth. The defensive backfield has significantly more depth. The Giants did a really, really good job adding to the depth of this roster this offseason, and I am extremely impressed with the way that Joe Schoen was able to construct this roster this offseason, considering the lack of cap space that they now have because they had to extend all of these big-name players like Daniel Jones and, of course, giving the franchise tag to Saquon Barkley. So it's been really impressive to see what the Giants did there with the depth of this team. I feel a lot more confident that if injuries arise, and they inevitably always do, someone always gets injured every single year. When they arise, I think that the Giants have those next men up who can make an impact going into this 2023 season. But of course, I'm really looking at the long-term cap health of this team, and I am so impressed. Even if they do sign Dexter Lawrence to that massive contract this offseason before the season starts, and he takes some money up on next year's books, they're still going to have like over $80 million to spend next offseason before they make their extensions and everything. So, Alex, before we wrap this one up, looking at the long-term future of this team, what could be in store here, right? They're going to make their extensions. They're going to sign their players at the end of preseason and everything. But you have to feel like there's something special that could be building considering how much cap space the Giants have down the road to really make some big-time investments at some important positions.
Well, look, as I referenced earlier, you want to set yourself up so that you're one piece away from that championship, right? You're one piece away from contending for a Super Bowl. The Giants are setting themselves up so they are just like that. Like, they are going to have ample salary space. They're going to be able to push money into the future. They have really good guys on the roster who are more than happy to restructure if it means they can add that missing piece. You know what I mean? Like, the Giants right now are front loading a lot of that money. So like a lot of that dead money, if they have to move on from anybody, they can easily do so and replace them if they have to do that. And if it comes to that, which I don't think it will, because a lot of these guys are high character, high work ethic type of individuals. But the future looks very bright, my friends. 2024 is going to be a little bit different because a lot of our depth is going to be Joe Schoen's draft selections, right? A lot of those UDFAs, a lot of those late round selections, a lot of those 1-year incentivized deal, those smaller contracts that, he made it last year and this year are still prevalent. And that same strategy applies. you go out and like we didn't see Gettleman often do a lot of these incentivized 1-year deals. Like I remember like maybe Kyler Fackrell was one of the only ones I can recall that actually panned out. These 1-year contracts for high upside players, even if they're coming off injury, like Paris Campbell played his first 17-game season last year, but the guy's talented, right? He's a really good slot receiver. He has some of the best speed. He can be a punt returner. He can do a lot of stuff for you. 1 year, $7 million deal. That's the maximum. I think it was a $4 million guaranteed. So there's another $3 million there. It might be more than that. Couple $1 million there that he has to earn by having career numbers. If you look at the incentives, he has to be healthy and he has to produce at a high level. And he has competition now because Jalen Hyatt plays out of the slot a lot. You know, you have Wan'Dale Robinson coming back at some point. You got Sterling Shepard coming back from injury. You got a lot of players here who are going to be fighting for reps. And, you know, you look at where the Giants are, and they have a lot of talent on the roster that it's not elite wide receiver talent, but there's a lot of wide receiver 2 talent there, and a lot of guys that can produce in their own ways. And ultimately, schematics and strategy can outweigh talent sometimes. You can make guys look better because of your scheme, and the Giants showed that last year. So right now, I am ecstatic about the future. The structure of the contracts are excellent. They're going to keep utilizing that strategy, bringing those 1-year deals in for incentivized contracts, which I think is exactly what they should be doing instead of overpaying other guys who ultimately don't pan out. Like, I'd rather go out and sign a couple of 1-year incentivized deals than a big contract for a player like Kenny Golladay. We learned our lesson there, right? Kenny Golladay was coming off an injury, had one really good year, and we made a big risk. We took a big bet. I'd rather, the kind of learning from our mistakes in the past, I'd rather go after guys who are going to, you know, be easy to move on from, and they have more of a, and if you're going to go after a big player with a lot of production, like, you know, a guy that's a Kenny Golladay type of receiver, a quality receiver, or somebody that like we want to invest big money in, they have to have a proven track record. They can't be coming off a big injury, and they have to have multiple seasons of top level, top end performance. And I think that's kind of what we've learned here. It's time to stop taking gambles. It's time to start relying on our coaches to get more out of cheaper players, because we have proven to be able to do that. So I'm pretty excited. I think we're heading in the right direction. This is totally different. And if you guys have been with us for a really long time, you know, we've learned a lot from what not to do from our past resumes. We've learned a lot of what bad looks like. And I think we can kind of sit here now and have a better idea of where we're going and acknowledge the fact that we were wrong. And a lot of people were wrong, including the management, on some of these players. But we can walk away learning something from that. We can walk away applying that knowledge to the future of this team. And I think we have a little bit better of a lens and a perspective on what success should look like now. So I am excited to see what the Giants continue to do, because they have definitely knocked it out of the park the last 2 years.
1000%. I am super excited as well. And I'm really confident. And I think that you hear a lot more analysts, a lot more fans. Everybody feels really confident in the New York Giants right now. And it's got a lot to do with who's in charge. I think people are really confident in Joe Schoen and also, of course, Brian Daboll. I mean, he's pretty much won over the entire NFL fan base. Everyone loves Brian Daboll. The dude is really the truth. He is the reason that everyone is so high on the New York Giants, myself included. So I am feeling really good about this New York Giants team. I think that they've made a lot of improvements this offseason that will result in immediate success, immediate improvements, and of course, the long term, as we discussed. So that pretty much recaps the 2023 salary cap space, health, and beyond. Of course, if you did enjoy this episode, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.